Okay, well, this video is just for you. So I want to try to help you to understand slope-intercept form. So I'm going to just go over this real quick. I have a 15-minute window here of making a video. If I have to make another one, I will. So we have to use slope-intercept form to find different forms of equations. So you need to know what slope-intercept form. Like anytime I say slope-intercept form, your brain's got to think y equals mx plus b. And you have to remember that m is your slope and b is a y-intercept. And we talked about y-intercepts are the points where the line crosses the y-axis. Y-intercepts are always the ordered pair 0, something. Slopes, you can find those by using the slope formula, or you can, let me move my computer so you can hear me better, or you could use the counting method, okay? So slope-intercept form was the first form we learned, slope and y-intercept. And then I taught you guys point-slope form. So point-slope form is right there, and to do point-slope form, you have to have a slope, which is m, same thing, and then you have to have a point. So your slope is m, and your point is x1, y1. That just means first x, first y. Now, you have to know, when to use point-slope form. Point-slope form is only used when you have no y-intercept given. When no y-intercept known. We talked about that. So this first part I'm going to go over with you is writing equations in slope-intercept form, and sometimes you might have to use point-slope form. So this is just our notes that we used in class. So I'm going to do number 1 here. It says write the equation of line in slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b, y equals mx plus b. You need a slope. I gave you a slope. You need a y-intercept. You have to say to yourself, okay, this is a y-intercept. It's a y-intercept because there's a 0 where the x is. So if I know the slope is m, that's -2. Your b is your y-intercept, which is the number 7. Instead of y equals mx plus b, you're going to substitute the -2 in for m. And then you're going to substitute plus 7 for your b. And that's as simple as that. If you know a slope and you know a y-intercept, you just substitute it straight into y equals mx plus b. That's straightforward. Then I'm going to go down here to, let's say, number 4. On number 4, I gave you a table. When I give you a table, you have to realize that there was no slope given. So you're going to have to find a slope. And then I'm going to look at my table and I'm going to say, I give you the y-intercept. Well, I did give you the y-intercept in this table, and you have to make sure you look at the ordered pair correctly. The x's are on top and the y's are on the bottom. So you're looking for the ordered pair that has a 0 where x is. In this table, the y-intercept is 0, 4. So that means I gave you the y-intercept. So you know b is 4. But I didn't give you a slope. And because this is a bunch of ordered pairs, you have to pick 2 ordered pairs. Now, if I had a choice, well, I would always pick positive ordered pairs so I don't make a mistake when I'm using the slope formula. So in order to do this, you have to know the slope formula. Hopefully you know the slope formula. I'll put it right here in case you don't. The slope formula, you're always going to subtract y's on top, and you're going to subtract x values on the bottom. So when I taught you all how to do the slope formula, I said make a big minus sign and a big minus sign. And you're going to take the second y, which is 12. That's this one right here. And then you're going to put the first y, which is 10 right here. The second x is 12 here. And then 9 goes here. Then you do your math, and you get 2 over 3. And that's your slope. So once you have a slope, once you have a y-intercept, you're going to put it in slope-intercept form. Y equals 2/3 x plus 4. Now these first 2 examples, I either gave you the slope and I gave you the y-intercept, or you had to find the slope and I gave you the y-intercept. So I haven't talked about point slope form yet. So if I turn this note sheet over, here's point slope form again up at the top. Y minus y1 equals mx minus x1. And remember, you use point slope form when no y-intercept known. So you have to know, if you don't know a y-intercept, you have to use point slope. So on number 5, you're always asking yourself, I'm going to go back for a second. I gave you guys this chart in class, and I don't know if you still have it in your notebook. You might not have it at home with you, but I included on the email. The first question you always say is, do I know the slope? If yes, you're going to write it down. And then you go, do I know the y-intercept? Now, if you don't know the y-intercept, that's when you use point slope. So that's what I'm going to show you right now. Hopefully you remember this chart. So if I look at number 5 here, I say, do I have the slope? And you have to realize that once again, M represents slope, so I have the slope. And this point here is not the y-intercept. Now, if it's not the y-intercept, that's when you're going to use point slope. So I'm going to write point slope here, which is y minus y1 equals mx minus x1. And remember, we're going to replace 3 things. We're going to replace this y, this m, and this x. And I get all those values from the information they gave me. So I'm going to start with y minus. Now think to yourself what you would put there. If you're not sure, I'm going to put it now. That should be -7. That's -7 because this is the y value of the ordered pair. And then you put equals the m value. The m value is -5 because right here is m. And then you put your parenthesis, x minus, and the last thing you substitute in is your 2, which we get from right here, our x1. Now, hopefully you recall we did that in class, and the reason we have to use point slope, and this is called point slope form. However, I've said in class this is ugly point slope form. And do you recall why this would be ugly? I say this is ugly because it says y minus a -7. We want to turn that into y plus 7 because we know that 2 negatives equal a positive. Now I'm going to put a PS over here. That is what point slope form is. So when you have a test and it says write something in point slope form, that's what it has to look like. Now, the direction said to write it in slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form is when y is by itself. So we learned in class, when you have point slope, the first thing you have to do is you have to distribute over on the right. So we're going to distribute above my word distribute. And when I do, I keep y plus 7 equals, I'm going to distribute and get -5x plus 10. But this is not in slope-intercept form because it's not y equals. So I'm going to get the y by itself by subtracting 7 on both sides. These opposites are gone. Y equals -5x plus 3. And that is in slope-intercept form. And I haven't got to standard form yet, just because I want to go over this with you. Point slope, slope-intercept. Why do I have to use point slope? I have to use point slope when I don't have a y-intercept. So if someone said to you, Will, what is the slope and what is the y-intercept of this slope-intercept form equation? You would be able to tell me, hopefully, the slope is -5 over 1 if I had to graph it. And the b is 3, which is the ordered pair 0, 3. Now, there's one more on this note sheet I want to go over with you, and then I'm going to have to make another video for standard form. But let's do this number 8. Now, I know I'm going to cross this out, so I have space to write over here. If I give you a graph and you have to write an equation in y equals mx plus b. It's the same thing. The first thing you say is, do I know the slope? Well, if I give you a graph, you're going to use the counting method to find slope. So you're going to pick any 2 points. So I gave you 3 points here. You could pick any 2 you want. I'm going to start here, and I'm going to go to here. So if I count using the counting method, I go down, down 2, right 3. So if I was writing the slope, I would write, I went down 2, right 3. And if you heard me in class say several times, if the slope is wrong, everything is wrong. So when you go down 2, that's negative 2. When you go right 3, that's positive 3. So this slope is negative 2/3. The next thing you need to write an equation in slope-intercept form is the y-intercept. Now remember, the y-intercept is the place where the line crosses the y-axis. I'm going to circle it. And if you look, can you see a point on the graph? You can't. So you don't know the y-intercept. Every time you don't know the y-intercept, you have to use point slope form. You don't know the y-intercept, you got to use point slope. To use point slope form, you need a slope. We have our slope is negative 2/3. Well, you also need a point. Well, there are 3 points over here you could pick. The point I just pointed to is negative 1, 8. You can use that one. This second point is 2, 6. You could use that one. This last point is 5, 4. It doesn't matter which one you pick, but if you're Mrs. Warren, you're going to pick one that does not have a negative. I'm going to pick the point 5, 4. So this is y minus y1 equals mx minus x1. Now, if anything here doesn't make sense to you, that's when you got to come to me and say, you lost me here, Mrs. Warren. I don't understand what's going on. So, when you're at school with me, but I can't talk to you now. But here's the y, and here's the m, and there's the x. Now remember, we're going to replace those. So I'm going to put y minus, I'm going to put a 4 for y1, equals, instead of m, we're going to use negative 2/3. And then I'm going to do x minus, and then x1 was 5. Now take a look at that. Does that make sense to you? Nothing needs to be polished there. That is called point slope form. But our ultimate goal was not point slope form. Our ultimate goal was slope intercept form. So what we have to do next, remember, to get y by itself, we have to distribute. So this is y minus 4 equals negative 2/3 x. Then you're going to take negative 2/3 times negative 5. That's plus 10/3. That's 3 1/3. And then I'm going to add 4 to both sides. And I get y equals negative 2/3 x plus 7 1/3. Now that's called slope-intercept form. And one thing you can always check, when you have a graph, this says that my slope is negative 2/3. If I pull that out, and it says my y-intercept, my b, is 7 1/3, which is the point 0, 7 1/3. So you go up on your graph, you go, hey, does that place where that crosses the y-axis look like that? 7 1/3? Yes. So I'm going to have to stop this video and make one more because I'm running out of time. But that is point slope and slope intercept form. So hopefully that sheds some light on this one.